Okay, guys, so I had a last minute appointment open up this morning, which is why you're getting a video and you get a sub here, but I want to make sure I walked you through what you need to do today. So the first thing to remember is in Unit 4, oh, sorry, not Unit 4, what am I doing, guys? Unit 5, in the French Revolution, under the Political Revolution folder, you guys had this assignment here. Was the French Revolution inevitable? And you were meant to answer that by doing the discussion board, which again, remember you needed to make one original post and then respond to 4 other posts with thoughtful, reflective ideas about what those people said, whether you agreed or disagreed. Remember also that the discussion prep and reflection file right here, you did these first 2 questions, what your thoughts are right now and why. After reviewing the discussion board, so I want you to go back into it at the start of class. I want you to review what other people posted and said, and then I want you to say, what did you learn from that discussion? What are some points that came up that challenged or solidified your thoughts or ideas? And last and most importantly, did your opinion change? Why or why not? And I'll have a couple physical copies of this at the front of the room in case you lost yours or want to do it on paper this time. Once you've done that, which should not take terribly long, go back to Unit 5, and we're going to be talking about technological revolutions now. And we're specifically going to talk about the Industrial Revolution. So today, folder 5.6, your assignment here is 2 parts. Number 1, you are going to, at the end of this class, turn in Life Before the Industrial Revolution notes. You can just take a picture of notes you take from the slideshow that I'm about to go through with you. The slideshow is also linked right here, and you're going to want that link to be able to review some of the content that you're not going to see in this video. Your next assignment will then be to take the Anatomy of a Revolution and the Industrial Revolution in the Crane-Britton model and map the Industrial Revolution onto it in its 4 stages. That's not due till next class, which will be Friday. So that's going to be ready to go when you come in on Friday. I will also leave some time at the start of Friday's class for us to go over this together in case you feel confused about it. All right? So let's talk about life before the Industrial Revolution. So the first thing we have to ask is, what was the Industrial Revolution itself? Now, if you look in this picture, you probably recognize this as a factory. Factories are part of our lives now. Factories are where we produce in large quantities a lot of the things that we use every day from various levels of complexity, right? But factories were a pretty new thing when they emerged in the 1800s and specifically in England. And we're going to talk about how this changes the world in some pretty dramatic ways. So the first thing you guys need to know is that the Industrial Revolution was a fundamental change in the way goods are produced, moving from human labor, meaning made by hand, to machine labor, meaning made by machines with human inputs. The more efficient means of production and the subsequent higher levels of production triggered far-reaching changes to society. So we could make things more efficiently, meaning we could make them faster, and that meant we could also make much more of them, which leads to a lot of changes in society. If you go to the link that for the slideshow in the folder, you can watch this video linked below, which will tell you a little more about that. The historical significance of the Industrial Revolution. So if you took an ancient Greek or a Roman and you put them in Europe in 1700, they would actually not take much time to adjust beyond the language and cultural factors. And this surprises people a lot, but it's true. Society, in terms of like its functionality, didn't change a lot between, say, the 250 AD and 1700. And that's because the way in which things were produced and the way in which things were handled through things like farming and agriculture didn't change a lot, okay? A good example I always give is if you were to go to the Revolutionary War in the United States, the rifles used by the revolutionaries, those were almost always certainly made one at a time by hand by a blacksmith or a machinist, and they were never exactly the same. You jump forward to the Civil War when the Industrial Revolution has started to take hold, and by that point, you're manufacturing rifles in mass amounts with replaceable, interchangeable parts, which is a huge difference. So the Industrial Revolution is going to change human life dramatically. More is created in the last 250 years than the last 2,500 years of human history. The Industrial Revolution is the reason why things change so fast in our current day and age. It encourages that type of progress. So what's life like before the Industrial Revolution? Well, 5 things you should know. Number 1, most people are living in rural settings. Most people are living out in the countryside, either in farms, small villages, or towns. There are not a lot of large cities And most of the time, those cities are centered around goods coming from rural settings. Industries are local, meaning things are made locally. So if you want to buy shoes, you're getting them from the person who makes them in your village or town. If you're in a really small village, you're maybe traveling up the road to the slightly larger village because that place has a cobbler, someone who makes shoes, and yours does not. But by and large, everything's being made locally, right? Your populations are small. Like I said, you have mostly small towns and villages, the occasional city, and those cities are nothing like the size of cities we see today. If you took somebody from a rural town in England or Germany and brought them to Portland, Maine today, ignoring all the technological advancements and things, the size of it would still be daunting to them because that would just not be a thing in cities at the time. You also had almost no spare time. So if you're a farmer, you are getting up with the sun, you are working all day to make sure your crops are growing, to make sure that everything is being watered and protected from weeds and invasive animals. Similarly, if you're a shepherd, you're doing the same thing, protecting your flocks of sheep or cows or goats. If you work in, say, carpentry or you're a forester, you're cutting down trees, from sun up to sundown, and then you're going to bed and getting up doing it the next day. With the, presence of Christianity, a lot of folks did take Sundays off somewhat, but life's hard. Life's hard and you have really no time to do anything but work. And that also means that you have no what we call disposable income. All of your money is being spent on necessities, food, shelter, clothing, etc. You don't have money to say, buy books for entertainment or to go to plays or something like that if you are your average person, right? So let's get a little more granular with this. So mostly rural. Lots of farming communities, people farm the land for their own needs in small plots. If you remember the French Revolution, one of the big changes is now the farmers actually own their land. They're no longer giving away what they grow to the people that they're sort of renting the land from. Well, in this case, now you've got farmers who farm the land, but it's their land, but still most of it they have to hang on to because they got to eat, right? You have local industries, sometimes called cottage industries, because they're literally out of somebody's cottage that they're working. So it's local or home craftsmen, sometimes also called the domestic system. All the products are organized and manufactured in the home, including textiles. You're making your own clothes at home, by and large, which means they're rough, they're not made really well to fit you or other people, and they're really just functional. That's the goal. We're not going to watch this video now, but again, if you want to come back and see it, you can. Small populations. Good rule of thumb for anything in human history, geography. The population of an area is determined on the availability of food and other resources. Food is the primary one because you have to have enough to eat to support the population. If the number of people exceeds the amount of food, you get famine, starvation, and death, right? But if food were to become more available and more reliable, your population is going to be able to increase. So if you had a way to shield your crops from being potentially destroyed, or if there was simply a way to grow more food so that the food loss was outstripped by the amount that you could grow, you could see a population increase. Little or no spare time. As we said before, farming and production, these are all-day affairs, sun up to sundown. You don't have time to do anything else. And no disposable income. People don't make a wage. So it's important to note that we did discuss how during the 1066 era and William the Conqueror taking over England, England was a target because it was one of the first countries to have a currency system, but that was really rare. And most of the time, what you did is you traded something to get something else. So if you did happen to be, say, a shoemaker, you might be able to trade that to someone who needed shoes to get a bit of their crops for food or maybe flour to make bread, something like that. Or if you're working with, say, a blacksmith, you could trade shoes or boots, for tools. You're not getting money that you then go and spend on something. You're getting items, and then you're swapping those items to get other items that you need. So if you wanted to check out this as an example, Down East dickering is the way they describe it. Dickering is a term for bartering, and these videos will give you an explanation of exactly how that would have played out. Again, we're not going to watch them now, but they are in the links to this slideshow in Schoology if you want to get more detail about how this system would have worked. Okay, so we've established what the pre-industrial world was like, right, with those 5 key things. How is this going to change? 3 major factors. You guys need to remember these. LLC. You need land, you need labor, and you need capital. Land means resources, iron, coal, access to water, such as rivers and streams, and location, meaning a place where trade or transportation of goods can occur, which mostly means, again, being near water, but that can also include the ocean as opposed to rivers and streams. You need labor, which means you need people. Now, in North America, South America, Central America, this has been solved through the cruel use of slavery. In Europe, it's going to require something different. How are you going to get enough people to work in these places that you can have substantial enough workers to produce more stuff? And of course, you need money, and you have to find a way to generate that money. Take a look here at this map of England and its estimated populations as well as resources. Really interesting to note that in 1750, the urban population is about 21% of the total population of about 5.7 million. Just 100 years later, that population will have ballooned to 3 times it, so it's 16.7 million, and half of that population now lives in cities. That is a 30% increase in urban population, city population, and it is almost a 3 times increase in overall population. So clearly, something dramatic happens in those 100 years. The other thing to notice is the map here, which is a little tough to see, but I think you can get the gist, where the red squares indicating major ports for trade, and then a variety of resources you'll see found in central England, particularly around like Sheffield and Manchester. So again, the land has to have resources. Now, in the case of England, it's got iron and coal, and lots of it. Coal fields are marked here in green, and that is going to be used to fuel a lot of the machinery that is used in these factories. And those factories, as you can tell if you look at the map again, are going to be largely textile. They're going to make clothes and cloth. And England also is benefiting from the fact it has lots of rivers and lots of seaports. Places like London, Norwich, Hull, Newcastle are all located quite near the ocean, and then others, such as Ashby, Nantwich, Exeter, are on rivers. Now, you compare this to the rest of the world and the availability of land and resources for its small size. Look at England right over here, or Britain, right, on this map relative to other countries. The amount of resources, specifically through coal and iron, shown here as blue and red triangles, is huge. And that means that the British have an incredible amount of resources to produce things like cotton, wool, and machinery. Okay, but the fundamental problem that we have, of course, is we need enough people. And as it says right here, if everyone farms for survival, who's going to work in these factories, right? So if you look at the city population differences, now this is across Europe, not just England, going from 1500 to 1800, so over 300 years, you can see that all of these increase in some way or another. Some see huge increases, Vienna, for example. Some are relatively stable but steady, Turin, Milan, right? We don't know in some cases what their populations were, such as Copenhagen, but we know enough to know that, generally speaking, these lines constantly move upward. We are just seeing increasing numbers of people in cities. Those people in those cities, they're going to be working in factories, taking those raw materials and turning them into something you can use. So if in these little sort of dotted sections, that's where textile production is going on. The circled areas are metal production, and you'll notice sometimes there's overlap. London had both going on, right? And that means that you've got this increase in people to man the factories, which means you can make more stuff. And that leads to money. So as the amount of things you can make increase, you get a stable banking system, and you start working towards trade. That trade is between countries, but also trade from colonies back to the countries that the colonists are coming from. More and more small farmers start getting moved off of small farms, and they end up in larger scale farms, sometimes by combining families to make more money off of a larger amount of land and more people working that land. So in a weird way, you could kind of say that this is the beginning of factory farming, although it's not going to get called that. But it's the idea that now farmers are working in larger groups as opposed to on an individual or family basis. And again, you take a look at that same map we saw before. This growth is immense in England. It's a huge jump in urban population as well as overall population. Okay, so one other question to consider is, with all of this having happened, the sudden shift in populations moving to cities, the increase in production of items, and more things being able to be sold, how does that come to the life we have today? So the question becomes, what does Britain invent? And this is going to be the last thing you're going to want to check out in this unit, or not this unit, but this section. We, again, are not going to watch it today, but this brief video will show you exactly what it is that Britain creates out of the Industrial Revolution. And really what it is what we consider modern society, with lots of goods on the shelves that have been mass-produced, meaning many of them made at the same time in the same way, lots of disposable income because people have jobs where they can spend money, and lots of people moving to cities because that's where all the work is, right? So your task then again today, turn in notes on that slideshow that we just went over. Again, the slideshow is linked right here, so you can go watch those videos. I would strongly recommend you do that to get more information. And then submit those notes here to this assignment. I will add a 5.6 in front of that so you can find it a little more easily. And be prepared to bring in your ideas for how this event, this technological shift, maps onto the idea of Crane Britain's anatomy of a revolution as though it were a cold. And I will see you guys next week.